Everyone, it's Lisa again, and I've got a recipe that might be of interest to my geography students. And we've been talking in class about food waste and the issue of when you've got embedded resources, like water and energy that were used to grow produce and transport it a long way. When you look in your CRISPR and you've got stuff that's going bad, you realize at that point that, yeah, this is a bit of a waste because all that embedded energy and water is going to be thrown out, basically. And the other thing is that it'll end up in the landfill or in the compost, and it could be giving off greenhouse gases, which is also a bad thing. So this is a way to reduce food waste and use up leftover vegetables, and it makes it really handy to use in situations like that. I'm also going to test out Beyond Sausage. This is something that my local supermarket began to stock, and I thought, well, I'll give that a try for cooking because I tried out the Beyond Burger and I thought, oh, that's not too bad. And yeah, I know it's highly processed, but so is breakfast cereal, and so is hot dogs and all kinds of other foods. So it's something I'm just going to experiment with and see what it's like to cook with it. Anyway, so I will share the screen here. And it's an Italian dish called pasta fazool. And yeah, I'm not Italian, I admit it, but a couple of my friends taught me how to make it, and I like it. It's a great way to get a lot of vegetables in one serving, basically, of a meal. It's very handy too, because you can make it and you can stick it in portions in the freezer, and when you need it, you can heat it up. And I find it very useful for when I'm working late and need to eat, and I'm just too tired to do much cooking at that stage. Now, using a recipe that was given out by Mayor LaGuardia, and here he is. This is the mayor of New York City in the 1930s and 40s, so during the Depression and also World War II. And here he is with the president of that era, FDR. And even though they're from different political parties, they worked really well together. They were friends, and LaGuardia supported FDR's initiatives with the New Deal. And as a result, New York got help to look after people who'd lost their jobs. It was such a major city in the US, though, that he knew that it was important to kind of use it as a showpiece for trying to solve these problems. So LaGuardia was able to do lots of these big public works projects that he became famous for. And he and the president worked together on this really important issue. Anyway, and here is LaGuardia with his kids, Eric and Jean. I believe Eric's still alive, in his 90s now. He was an English professor at the University of Washington in Seattle. And so here he is. Um, the family's right here. And so even though he's probably lifting, I'd say at least 80 to 90 pounds of child right there, LaGuardia wasn't a huge guy. He was only 5 feet 2 inches tall, which is exactly my height. So I've got some affection for the guy. And besides that, he was a war veteran. He was a pilot in World War I. He was a bomber pilot in Italy, and he had a major plane crash in which he's injured his back very seriously. So he was probably in pain for the rest of his life, but he's stifling that so he can play with his kids at the beach on the summer day in New York. And that's a pretty cool photo. Anyway, one of the things that LaGuardia is famous for is his pursuit of the mafia when he was mayor. And because he was Italian and Jewish as well, he really felt a lot of resentment about these people who were in organized crime, who were running the city at times. And so he really felt that he wanted to go after them. And I know, like, my Italian friends are, they always feel mixed feelings about things like mob movies, because, well, The Godfather is an American classic. It's like, it'd be great to have a story about someone who wasn't a mobster. So LaGuardia felt the same way. So he really spent a lot of time trying to clean up the city. And here he is in a market buying produce. And he actually made an effort to try to protect the vendors from being extorted by the mob bosses who are asking him to pay protection money. And so LaGuardia built a bunch of covered markets in New York City to try to get the vendors into a secure location. And he was really concerned about that in terms of the city. And here are some of the thugs who were implicated in some of these rackets. And you might recognize Al Capone there in the photo. And also a guy named Ciro Terranova, who was the artichoke king. And he was one of the people who was attempting to corner the artichoke market and drive up prices and basically terrorize the sellers. And so people who are selling vegetables, like this fellow here, they would have to pay the mob to leave them alone, basically. And so there's artichokes in that photo, but I've heard that the ones that LaGuardia was concerned with were a much smaller variety that were used mainly by the Italian immigrants at the time. But this was something that LaGuardia went after during his time in office, the Artichoke War, which is dramatized on the Drunk History series. And even though the person telling the story is drunk, actually the major facts of the case are, I've been able to check some of the stuff that they talk about in that episode, and it seems to hold up pretty well. So if you check Drunk History season 4, it's there, with a bunch of other stories under the food category. Anyway, so just a historical side note there. So here's the Beyond sausage that I got. You can see it looks very much like actual meat-based sausages. This is the Italian flavor, and you can see it's kind of a pinkish tint, I believe is from beet juice. So I thought, I'm just going to see how this works. I used it on a pizza a while ago and it turned out fairly well. So I thought, yeah, I think I can try it out in this dish as well. So for this, you'll need a pretty large sized pot because you're putting a lot of stuff in it, and some olive oil, some Beyond sausage. I was using a chunk of bacon about maybe this size uh, when I was cooking for a non-vegetarian meals. But again, Beyond sausage is something I'm just going to try out this time around. You'll need some garlic. And again, for this series of videos, doesn't really matter whether you're using raw garlic like this or powdered garlic, that's fine as well, whatever's available. Onions, some chopped up onions, a couple of cups of those, and chopped carrots, another couple of cups. And also this recipe is really good for stuff like using up celery. I used to really be concerned about buying celery because it meant that there'd be all these leaves and kind of the outer stalks that were kind of bruised up would not get used. And I thought that's a bit of a waste to put it in a compost. But this recipe, you can use up chopped celery leaves and outer stalks, and it works really well. You can also put in stuff like bell peppers. I like the red, orange, or yellow type. But again, if you don't like peppers, or you haven't got any, no problems. Whatever you like, whatever's available, works really well in this dish. And I've used jalapeno pepper. I've got some that I grew this summer that I'm going to try out. The main thing though is to have some tomatoes, and they can be canned or fresh. Here's the canned variety I've been using. It's the 800 milliliter size of can, 28 fluid ounces, so pretty decent sized can of tomatoes there. And also the kale, and I've talked about my trepidation about kale and previously, but one thing that helps in this recipe is to strip the leaves off the stems and kind of chop them up separately, because if you cut the stems up and you put them in with the harder vegetables like carrots, you got to advance on the cooking and it kind of helps soften them up, and that can then help in terms of making sure that this is kind of nice uniform quality to it. So kale is good to have for this recipe. Any other kind of greens too, like endive would work too, I imagine. And also the beans are pre-cooked for this dish, or canned beans, which of course are pre-cooked, preferably the kind that are light colored. So white kidney beans or cannellini or Romano beans like this are good, although you could use red chili type beans too, but like those red kidney beans. The white ones seem to work a little better from my perspective anyway. And I've also been putting in some of these little red adzuki-type beans too, just because they add a little bit of variety and I like them as well. So anyway, so that's the beans. Spices, so black pepper, some chopped parsley, also Italian herbs. I've been using this ready-made mix that I get in bulk from the bulk barn. And vegetable stock, again, it's not essential, but it's nice to have. You can have it as the cube type of stock or a liquid equivalent if you make your own, for example, or you could use chicken stock if it's non-vegetarian, whichever you like. And also the dried pasta. Now, some of the recipes suggest using a very short, kind of cylindrical type of pasta, like ditalini. This is the type here. I'm just going to show it up for the camera here. These little tube-like ones. But people are telling me that it doesn't really matter what kind of pasta you use. Even broken spaghetti works just fine. And if you've got spaghetti you don't want to use because it's in a rough shape and it's kind of mangled, this might be a good way to use it up, so it doesn't go to waste. Anyway, you can do most of this in one pot. So that's very handy. So fry the sausage up in the pot, just take the big pot, put in some olive oil and fry it up, and cut the sausage into chunks and set it aside. So take it out of the pot and free the pot up. So the next thing you put into the pot, maybe add a bit more olive oil to that if it's dried out a bit. And then you cook the garlic, onions, and carrots. I'm going to add the carrots in there because they're a bit harder than the rest of the vegetables, so they may take a little while to cook. And that way you kind of get a jump on the cooking that way. So you cook them a while until they start to get a bit soft, and you add the celery and the peppers because they don't take quite as long to cook, and then some of the herbs. When everything's kind of mixed together and it's kind of gotten soft and it's looking like it's on its way to cooking, what you can do is you can add the tomatoes. So open up the can and put the tomatoes in. And also what you can do is you can add some water. And what I do is I just kind of rinse the can out to get the juice out of the can and then pour it into the pot. So you've got the water in there as well. And it keeps the stuff from cooking up too rapidly. And it just kind of covers the bottom of the pot that way. Then you add the sausage. And you can put in the vegetable or chicken stock, whatever, at that time, and then you just kind of cook everything till the mixture is starting to simmer a bit. Now, at this point, you could add the dry pasta if you're having it just as that one dish and you're going to eat it all up at the same time. But I've been cooking it separately. I've been saving the pasta and cooking it in a different pot because what I've been doing is I've been cooking up a lot of this stuff at the same time for the pasta fazool, and then I'm putting it into separate containers, and in some cases I'm freezing it in the freezer and then taking it out a long time afterwards, heating it up, and then I can add cooked pasta to it and I've got a meal right there. The thing is if you cook everything at the same time, if you cook the dry pasta at this stage, then that means that it's going to get kind of soggy if you store it for a long time, and like in the fridge, or if you put it in the freezer like that. So I've been finding if I just cook the pasta later on, I know it's not traditional, but it doesn't break down quite as much. Now you might want it to break down because when the pasta starts to kind of basically break apart in the stew, it makes it kind of thick and gooey, and people might like that. That might be great, but I've been trying it the other way around, and it seems to work pretty well that way as well. So at that stage, when you've got all the stuff kind of simmering, that's when you can add the chopped kale leaves because they don't take as long to cook. And of course, the beans are already cooked, so you can just put them right in and maybe rinse the can out and put the juice in there, and then keep cooking until it's simmering again. Add the parsley if you've got it, and then you can, if you're cooking the pasta separately, just add it before you serve it, and you've got this al dente pasta that's in the dish, and everything kind of comes together. All right, thanks a lot. Have a good day.